There have been thousands of killings of Christians by Fulanis.
Donald Trump yesterday restated that he will ensure that he restores every Christian right and democratic right in any nation where Islam seems to be suppressive. We saw how Donald Trump, in the last 40 days that he has been the president, how he has been able to reduce the influence and affluence of Islamization. The first thing he did was to take away the funding. He exposed how the Hamas, yes, how the Hamas have been funding, and we are now seeing situations whereby bandits are running, they are dropping their guns, and indeed we can see that the Biafra as a state has now regained relative peace.
Yes.
Mr. Ralph, welcome. What's your reaction?
It is going to be a triangular explanation or secular explanation, because I'm going to just from the, Trump's statement of not allowing all the Christians all over the world to be disallowed anymore by the terrorists. From there, I will come to Nigeria here, where it is obvious that we, Nigerian country, are using that diaspora remittance of USAID to fund bandits, to fund all the insurgents in the northeastern Nigeria. Then again, it has all ended there. We've seen how Hamas has been using remittance, at least funding from the United States, to perpetrate their atrocities at the Gaza. So welcome to this wonderful analytical point of view stage, where we understand that Trump has actually come to stop all the menace, encroaching across Africa by the Muslims, let me say Janjaweeds in Africa, like in Somalia, like in Sudan. Then you have Nigeria here. In Nigeria here, you have Al-Qaeda, stricken northern region that is having ISIS affiliation called ISWAP. ISWAP has actually teamed up with Boko Haram, an insurgent that just all of a sudden erupted during the regime or tenure of Musa Umaru Yar'Adua.
Okay.
That was Umaru Yar'Adua when he sprang up, and we began to at least derail from doing the needful as a result of tribalism, as a result of religious bigotry.
Just the data alone of all the massacres that have occurred, he couldn't have known if there were more headsmen on their way to kill him. He has seen reports of what these people do. This guy just stabbed him. And so to expect him to reasonably assume that to fulfill the conditions of the law he needed to flee made no sense.
Yeah, but nevertheless, do remember that a lot of Nigerian law is based on English common law. And if you go into somebody's house to rob the person, I think it's different in America. It's that standard ground thing. You can actually shoot the person. If you did that in the UK, you'd be charged with murder.
Well, yeah, but here's the issue. The issue is that the attacker brought the knife, he overpowered him and took the knife after he sustained injuries. And this is why I have a problem. The evidence shows that he was injured in the leg. And then you say that he should have run. So he was at that moment momentarily incapacitated to even be able to run. I mean, the facts are not in doubt. This man did not die, that this attacker died as a result of the attack. But the circumstances was he attacked me, I was in fear for my life, and I fought back.
Were there any witnesses?
There were no witnesses. But, I mean, even the prosecution admitted that the weapon belonged to the attacker. The evidence, he had scars on his body of the injuries he sustained.
Right. Okay, let me ask you, William.
Yes.
Are you now in the process of trying to reach out to political leaders in Adamawa State in order to seek clemency? Because that's the only option, really.
That's the only option. We are bringing out every possible person, method, ability to be able to grant clemency to Mr. Sunday Jackson, who is totally innocent. And so, yes, we are on a fast track to alert people that here's a man that you can stand up for from a human rights perspective. Be a hero today in Nigeria on the issue of human rights and stand up for this nobody, Sunday Jackson, that's totally innocent in spite of what the Nigerian Supreme Court said today. So yeah, we're initiating and we're going full force on that.
And how much time has he actually got now?
Well, we're not sure what the timeline is now.
Right.
And just to illustrate the level of disappointment, we had someone on standby to pick him up from prison today.
Yeah.
And I couldn't make the call to say he's not going home, he's going to be killed. His children are ill. We've had to take care of them. His wife abandoned him. And so even in this time, he's not surrounded by his family, and we're going to put him to death. But I do want to make a quick point here about we're standing up not just for him, but for all of us. The Fulani militia have killed thousands of Christians. They've killed Muslims as well. And many of them are foreigners. So we have a situation where foreigners come and kill Nigerians with impunity, and Nigerians can't defend themselves.
Yeah.
In the Northwest right now, Lakawura is a Fulani terrorist group that was invited to come and help stop the terrorism of Boko Haram and bandits. And they're now killing the people they came in to protect.
Right.
So Nigeria is under siege. And there are more Nigerian citizens on death row in Nigeria now for defending themselves against Fulani headsmen than there are Fulani headsmen in Nigerian prisons in death row. That's just wrong. That's unacceptable.
Upside down.
So no idea how much time he's actually got.
No.
Because I mean, there must be a period that allows for the clemency process to
Well, the court did not issue their opinion today, and they said not till next week. So we're on a fast track.
So they just made an announcement.
Right. They
That's
just
why I
made
said
the
it took
announcement.
2 minutes.
Right.
They had 30 judgments to deliver today, so they said they couldn't read everything, and they'll just give the conclusions. So all we had was dismissed.
Right.
And we won't know till next week. But I will contrast this with the death row case in Indonesia that we won.
Well, I'm going to come to that in a minute, because we're fast running out of time. But
Yes.
I mean, he's been in prison for 10 years.
Yes.
What must his mental state be?
Well, we saw February 19th, 2021. We went to Yola, and we actually had access to visit with him and to pray for him. So here's a man that has lost everything simply because he was trying to defend himself and defend his family and defend his farm. As Barrister said, how did Sunday Jackson know that there may be 20 other Fulanis that are coming right behind this gentleman who attacked him? So his mental state, you can imagine being in prison for 10 years, losing your family, losing your children, losing your wife. I mean, the man is crushed and depressed, and that's why we are going to continue to advocate for the innocence of Sunday Jackson.
And Emmanuel, you were talking about Indonesia.
Yes.
I mean, you've done a lot of cases across the world. Tell us about that case in Indonesia where you got a Nigerian off death row, and how that contrasts with what happened here in Nigeria.
Yes, so that was a fascinating case. It's definitely one of the most complex cases I've had to deal with. And the gentleman was convicted under the identity of Emmanuel Ihejirika, which wasn't his real name. The passport wasn't his own passport. So he ended up, by mistaken identity, getting a death sentence for crimes that he did not commit. And we had to prove that he was not a Sierra Leonean, but a Nigerian. And we couldn't get the data from the NIS. And so
that's the
Nigerian Immigration Service.
Yes.
So we had to conduct a DNA test on his brother from Ebonyi State here in Abuja. And then we had to do a DNA test on him in prison to establish. This is one of the most bizarre cases ever. We had teams of lawyers working in Indonesia, Australia, Pakistan, and Malaysia, and then myself in the US. And very fortunately for us, the Indonesian Supreme Court granted him a reprieve, and he came home after 20 years from a country that is, the biggest Muslim country in the world. There's a bit of racism in that country, and Nigerians have a terrible reputation. But the Supreme Court set a poor Nigerian free, and he came back maybe about a year ago to Nigeria.
Yes.
The work that Sonny Akoni, the counsel on this case, did was fascinating. He's won death row cases before, but this was a big shocker to us. And about the timeline, quickly, I was going to say, in Indonesia, we came into the case after he had exhausted everything. He was awaiting execution. But the Indonesian ambassador told me here in Abuja, he said, listen, 27 days to his conviction, you have a right, to his execution, you have a right to file an additional appeal. So we went around the world and we gathered our data. We had huge briefs. When he was told he was going to be executed, we submitted our appeal. And a couple of years later, the court said, we're going to overturn his death sentence. So in our case in Nigeria, we don't know the clock we're working with, but definitely time is of the essence to get him free.
But on a final word,
Yes.
he now essentially is in a race for his life.
He is in a race for his life. And this Indonesian case was a great day of celebration because we brought that gentleman home and landed here in Abuja on Christmas Day of all things. So we're going to be with Sunday Jackson until the final lap of this, and we are hoping to God that our prayers will be answered, and we ask others to pray, Charles, and thank you for bringing attention to Sunday Jackson, this innocent man.
Well, thank you for bringing that story to us, we're very encouraged by the work that you do, both of you, and keep doing it. Dr. William Terence Devlin is an American human rights leader who's been supporting Mr. Jackson, and of course Emmanuel Ogebe is a member of his defense team, and he's a US-based human rights lawyer. Thank you very much indeed to both of you.
Thank you, Charles. And so as a human rights advocate and as a pastor, I'm here to advocate for this man who is totally innocent. So it has international implications. The eyes of human rights advocates are now on Nigeria. Like, how could this happen? How could this possibly happen? And this is a sad day, Charles, for human rights in Nigeria. Sunday Jackson, and I'm not a lawyer, I'm a human rights advocate. Sunday Jackson, by anyone's estimation, is totally innocent. And the issue where this man was out farming, minding his own business, and then the attacker came and a struggle ensued. And of course, this man is going to defend himself. That's why we call it self-defense. And yet today, we were at the Nigerian Supreme Court, and it was very brief. It was only about maybe 2 minutes long. And we just wept at the failure of the Nigerian Supreme Court to say that this man, and they had the opportunity to say this man was totally innocent. We haven't seen all the ins and outs of the decision, but we had the opportunity to meet this humble farmer, this young man who unfortunately his wife abandoned him, had been on death row for 10 years. So Sunday Jackson has now become an international case for human rights.
Yes,
and
because
so we're going to continue to advocate.
I was going to ask you what are the international dimensions of this case?
Well, the international dimensions are Open Doors, which is a human rights organization, has recounted that there have been thousands of killings of Christians by Fulanis. And so as a human rights advocate and as a pastor, I'm here to advocate for this man who is totally innocent. So it has international implications. The eyes of human rights advocates are now on Nigeria. Like, how could this happen? How could this possibly happen? Manslaughter, at least, because murder one that he's being convicted of and may face hanging if we can't get clemency for him, it has to be premeditated. So what justice on the Nigerian Supreme Court, that didn't pop up and say to him or her, this is a case of self-defense and this man is totally innocent. So we encourage people to continue to pray for Sunday Jackson and his innocence.
Emmanuel, what was the prosecution's argument? I understand that they urged the court to convict Mr. Jackson solely on his confessional statement and based on the fact that death had occurred. So basically, no mitigating circumstances, and that was pretty much how the judge saw it.
Yes, so part of the problem is they are arguing that he had a responsibility to flee. Now, in the US, we have, stand your ground rules, which means you can defend yourself as much as you want. Now, here, they're arguing that instead of fight, you should have flight. You should flee.
In other words, after he overpowered the man and retrieved the knife, there was no further need to stab him.
Yes, but that is not accurate, and I don't think that's a fair requirement to make to someone who is facing imminent death. Now,
That was why Yar'Adua was playing emotional. He could not thoroughly stamp them out until Jonathan came and tried his best. He did not stop there. And Boko Haram has grown into a giant, an incurable giant today in Nigeria country. Let us just diversify. Let us move towards the angle of Somalia, where Al-Shabaab are teamly, largely, occupy the forest, the desert over there.
Well, before you digress, the Democratic members in the parliament yesterday, most of them were actually seeking for the return of US aid. You remember that it was under the Democratic rule of Barack Obama and of course Biden that Islamization and terrorism even tried.
Began.
Yesterday we saw how they were shouting, they were protesting.
They were
protesting against Donald Trump. Like,
yes.
Return the US aid, Africa needs it. And most of these guys, surprisingly, are Muslims.
Yes.
In the House of Congress.
Yes. You know what? The Democrats are sleeping giants. I could actually analyze it, streamline my points based on what I know in the past about Democratic Party platform in the United States. It was during Democratic era of Bill Clinton that Al-Qaeda leader, late Osama bin Laden, actually led or sponsored 7 pilots, terrorist pilots that actually used American aircraft, turn it against missile against American various cities in 2001. I'm talking about September 9/11. It was Al-Qaeda that actually trained Mohammed Atta, Mohammedis, all of them. Mohammed Atta is from Egypt. All of them that use American aircraft to bomb the Pennsylvania, Pentagon, Washington, the WTO building in New York. Those pilots, they enter because of the kind of the diplomacy Americans, outside Americans, the Arabs, the Indians were enjoying anytime democratic is in charge of American government. Now we know that the people that are in charge are the Republican. Donald Trump is a Republican. They are the dogs of war. If you want war, they will give you war. They are not diplomatic. They don't pet truth. They don't pet war. They actually stand eyeball to eyeball with war or whatever war represents. And you can see the diplomats could not contain it when Trump has actually stood up that is going to stop USA ID remittance into African countries. That's why you see all the Muslims, American Muslims, walking out of Congress House, out of the Capitol yesterday, because they are against that policy, because they are the ones that are funding terrorism across Africa. Look at what is going on in Nigeria here. The Democrats, they are responsible. During the Obama regime, the money, the funding of USAID thrived too well, straight 8 years, which was why they used it to fund all manners of insurgency in the northern Nigeria. It is the money from the United States. And when Trump actually assumed office, he found out. He worked with FBI. Trump could be the Director General of CIA now. That is how American system works. Their president is always, if he no head the FBI, the president will head CIA, Central Intelligence Agency. He found out what went wrong, where this money are coming from, who are those billionaires funding terrorists in the south, in the northeastern Nigeria. It was actually, the investigation actually ended up inciting USAID. And you can see those bad eggs in the house and their accolades. They were the ones that were working out on Trump yesterday. Examine them well. All of them are Democrats. Democrats are too cool. Democrats are too quiet. They are very, very diplomatic, thereby causing America this kind of dangerous insecurity. What happened in September 11 was that as a result of the quiet nature, diplomatic attitude of the Democrats, many terrorists were able to migrate from Middle East Europe into United States of America. And as they entered, the security of that land, the Homeland Security, the CIA and the FBI could not actually find out their major reason of coming in their large numbers, because during the time of Bill Clinton, they lived together with Arab Americans. They mixed up very well. There was no visa ban for people that are coming from Middle East Europe, I mean Arab world. That's why they could not suspect those boys, those terrorists trained by the tunnel engineer giant Osama bin Laden. And they manipulated America and lived in America for many years, studying how to pilot aircrafts, and successfully they were all graduated. And you see the aftermath, they used the American airplane, they coordinated the plan too well. It was in the morning time like this. I was working that time at GRA. All of a sudden, the very establishment where I was working was having a bigger screen, very mighty lucid. What do you call it? LCD. I saw it. They attacked. Up to how many numbers of airplane took up at the same time, well coordinated. Oh my God, it was like a movie. And they actually succeeded on bringing down the two tallest buildings in New York, the WTA, World Trading Center. Two of them were the major targets, and they all brought them down. The one that was targeting White House could not get to White House because the pilots, American passengers that were sitting closer to the cockpit, could at least struggle with Mohammed Atta. They used knife and struggle until they prevailed on Mohammed Atta. That was the one that was targeting White House to bring down George Bush Oval Office. And the passengers in that aircraft prevailed against Mohammed Atta, whose origin is from Egypt. He's still alive. He is in federal prison in the USA. And then again, the one that was targeting Pentagon. Pentagon is where American military headquarters is. That was where they actually, if they want to embark on military operation or air blaze, that is where they were going. That's where they are going to have unanimous agreement on how such military operation should be actually conducted. And the very airplane that was targeting Pentagon could not actually succeed, but northern side of Pentagon was brought down because Pentagon is a big building with 5 shape. Yeah. Pentagon meaning 5. So this northern part of Pentagon was destroyed by these terrorists. It did not affect the whole Pentagon. That was how the terrorist, terrorist activities that day or act.
So indeed, the world seems to be safe again under the watch of Donald Trump.
Donald Trump is a dog of war. The Republicans are dogs of war. Let me tell you, when you talk about war, you remember the Republican. I know vividly in 1986, 87, 88, how Ronald Reagan was a Republican. He wasn't a Democrat. That was how Ronald Reagan continued concentrated assault on Lord of Terror. Whom am I referring to? The Lord of Terror was Mama of Gaddafi. He answered it as AKA, that is a Lord of Terror that is sponsoring terrorism across the whole Northern Africa. He came out and challenged America. That's why Ronald Reagan regime penciled Lord of Terror, Mama Gaddafi, as one of the most dangerous enemy of the West. Mama Gaddafi sponsored the terrorists that actually bombed Lockerbie, Heathrow Airport in the UK. Yes, that was I think 1986/1987 or 86/85. And they bombed Heathrow Airport and went scot-free. Then the world, the United States, especially United Nations, all the member nations said that provided Lord of Terror said he was responsible, that is going to present those terrorists that attack Heathrow Airport in London. And they follow the case. They follow the case from how many years? It was this new millennium, beginning of new millennium, that Lord of Terror, Muammar Gaddafi, surrendered the terror.